Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Tainted Warriors. I'm Mikey.
I'm Nicole.
And this week's episode, we are gonna go a little...
Conspiracy.
Yeah, conspiracy and a little heartfelt, I guess. You know what I mean? We're
attacking your patriotism.
A little bit, you know. And I guess, you know, we're gonna just speak some truth.
Little secrets about September 11th that aren't really known and maybe being kept from.
Right, because honestly, I'm not even gonna lie. There was, it was not easy. Nicole definitely told me that she did a lot of research, and I looked over her notes, and there is a lot. I was banking on being able to have my whole layout and be able to tell you about this great movie that got me. This movie literally got me into conspiracies. Let me realize, like, whoa, there's other ways people think out there, and there's other, you know, there's not everything being told to you all at one time. I guess is the best way to put it. But before we get into all that, let's do this question of the week. We just had a wicked long debate about it. Well, not a debate, a discussion, you know.
I didn't know my answer, so I just figured it out.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of knew mine. Let's tell them what the question is first.
It is, if you were ruler of your own country, what is the first law you would introduce?
Do you want me to tell my answer first?
Sure.
Okay. So, when we just had, like I said, we did just kind of talk this out. And when I got the question, I took it as what's going to be your very first law that not, you know, law or guideline that you would enforce as your own ruler. One of, like, the number one, not meaning that there's not going to be any more. You know what I mean? I would add more to this, but that would be the golden rule. I don't know if they still teach it, you know, but it is the do unto others as you'd want to be done unto you. The way that I look at it, I don't know, it just always touched me growing up. It's the way that I took it kind of literal in the way of, like, the way that I live my life, the way that I talk to people, the way that I act around people, the way that I treat people, you know, even personal space. You know what I mean? It comes into that. I want my personal space, so I'm not going to invade your personal space because I don't want you to do it to me.
I do the same.
So, you know, I just always feel like that would be a good guideline to what I'd want to rule my country as. Not saying it's the only guideline. There would be more. But this would be one that I'd want almost all of my citizens to kind of always have thinking about that. Before you make that move, do you want that done onto you? You know what I mean?
I think it's unto. But
onto. I'm gay. We know I like it on.
Okay, so with my answer to this question, I kind of just took it as more of a general, like, blanket kind of thing. I wasn't really thinking about how you could add, like, amendments or additional laws. I was just like, this is the one law that's going to be in effect for, like, who knows how long. If it's anything like our Congress, it could be forever. So, my rule was just going to be, I think it was just, like, be kind, or be tolerable, and don't resort to physical violence. Like, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, basically, nobody gets into fights, everybody's kind of peaceful, and if you don't fucking agree with someone, then it's like, okay, whatever, you move on with your day.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I like that. I totally, it kind of,
it's basically
the same exact thing. I just, you know, I don't know if you want to get too dark, so it's just, you did get a little, you thought about it differently. So, you know what I mean? That's where it both led into it.
I try to think like true crime. So, like, I'm thinking, like, okay, there's bad people out there that are going to take this literal and use it to justify their bad behavior.
Right. And then that's not wrong, and I totally don't blame you. The way that I've looked at it, though, was that, like, I'm the ruler, I guess, not to sound cocky, but I'm the ruler. What I say goes. So I'm not going to lie, if I realize, like, I guess I would take everything circumstantial, too. Like, you know what I mean?
Dictator in your country? Because if you're the ruler, it doesn't...
No, I guess I wouldn't say a dictator, but I guess I would try to honestly run, I would try to run, like, it as fair as I possibly could. So I would have almost like the branches without having branches. Like, I'd be so involved. There'd be minority people. There'd be regular, like, people that were from here.
Diverse.
We'd all kind of have, and we'd all have a voice. You know, call it a town meeting if you'd want. But we'd all kind of get together and be like, hey, either this is working or this isn't working. So let's change it or let's keep it going. You know, I don't want this, oh, you're the only one that has say or do. That's not going to be the best for everybody.
Right.
And, you know.
I'm with you.
And that's just the way that's why I took it. Like, you know, you are giving me my opportunity to rule my own place. And obviously I feel like it's because this place went down. So I'm going to learn from their mistakes. I'll do what they were trying to do and actually do what was good for the people.
You will not be compromised by certain people that may be behind other incidents, such as the one we're discussing today.
Exactly. So, we do want to start off, disclaimer, we're not trying to be like coming after the government, saying that, you know, don't believe everything that they say or that this whole thing was a hoax. You know, I do want to say that, you know, there are probable things that happen, that there's a reason why, I guess, we can say that this became a national tragedy and the story that we're telling is the way that it is because there are a lot of facts. We just found little kinks in said facts to make it be like, all right, did you stretch the truth a little bit more? Was this maybe pre-planned? Was it really 14 terrorists, or could it have been 19 terrorists, or could it have been just 19 people, and we just needed somebody to point the finger at? Is what, you know, is, I guess, a good way of summarizing. Nicole's got a lot of it right now. She's going to give you the full one. Like I said, I'm just going to give you what I remember from the documents, but I do want to start off by stating, like, what we remember, because we both, not to age ourselves, but we were both alive while this tragic thing was happening.
I was in 6th grade.
I was in 5th. Should have been in 6th. But, you know, so we actually both have really different stories about how this happened too. And, I'll start off, if you don't mind. We were sitting there, I was in 5th grade, which for us, when we both went to the same school, that was our last year of elementary school. So it kind of felt like a big deal. It's like, maybe 2nd week of school too? You know what I mean? We haven't been going that long. So
I think that was the first week, because we went back to school the Wednesday after Labor Day.
See? So, I mean, you still kind of got those jitters. That's what I meant. You know what I mean? You're not fully comfortable with everybody yet. You know, you're still getting into the groove of things. So I remember early in the morning, the way that the classrooms were kind of set up, there was a divider. And the best way that I could describe it is like an accordion that, you know what I mean, that pulls in and out. And this, you know, they kind of pull all the way out and you could lock it, and it would divide 2 classrooms. I guess maybe it was better than putting up a real wall. So, the teacher from the other side came, like, unlatched the hatch and flipped it open really quick and was like, you need to, talking to our teacher, calling her name, and was like, you need to see what's going on right now. I can't believe it. And at this time, we'd wheel in TVs, and he, I think, already had it for that moment to show his class something, and he was turning it on to show them, and happens to see that there was a plane that crashed into one of the Twin Towers. Well, as he's telling us what's going on, like catching us up on the first plane, and he's showing us the news, we watched the second plane crash into the building. And, you know, the kind of aftermath of all that was going on. I was really young, so I can say it was very naive of me. But at the time, I wasn't understanding what was going on. I didn't know of terrorists. I didn't know of a terrorist attack. I understood to a little concept of that. I guess there was a lot of people in this building. There were people on the planes. So, you know, in your young mind, you have to think that, you know, obviously something bad happened to all these people. Not knowing it's going to cause a war,
Right.
And that they're going to make this a huge, huge thing that happened and all these things. And I'm watching people cry and I'm like, am I wrong for not crying and not knowing what's going on? But I guess I was just young.
You really only know what you were exposed to by your family and like
right
in school. I feel like they were probably limited. I mean, I don't really remember, but I feel like they were probably limited in what they were allowed to show / discuss in relation to that. You know what I mean? So,
like I said, I just remember like I remember feeling in that moment too, like we were making history, not just sitting in that classroom watching that. That's gonna change the way that even classrooms are held, or just even viewing points and techniques. I don't know. It was just such a life-changing moment in everyone's. Like and like I said, I was so young, I didn't even realize what was actually going on.
I was in 6th grade, so when the first plane actually hit, I was in social studies, and nobody like knew anything. The teacher didn't find out. Like we didn't know shit. And then I think each class was like an hour and 10 minutes or something like that. So it was like 9-10ish, and then I went to science class, and that was when one of the kids in class was like talking to the teacher, like, do you know that the World Trade Center got hit and like planes took them down? Like, I don't know if they were taken down at that point. I don't remember that, but we barely talked about it. I think the teacher talked to him for like a minute or two, and then like we literally went back to the science lesson, and none of my teachers that I can remember spoke of it at all that day. I remember going home, and it was 2:50. That was the time I got home every day. And I was sad because Passions wasn't on. Like, that was a soap opera. I would catch the last 5 minutes of it every day. And then I saw, like, planes, like, crashing into the building's collapsing. And I'm like, I got sad because I'm like, there's a lot of people that are hurt. But, like, I also didn't really understand. Even though I didn't understand, I do remember later on, like, when they were doing all the, like, fundraising and stuff for the victims, like, I was always like, okay, like, I want to donate. I'm pretty sure of that. I mean, my mom maybe might know better than me, but I'm pretty sure, like, I always wanted to donate and try to do things for them. Just because, like, I believe I still felt empathy for the people. I was just young, so, like, so I was like, oh, my soap opera's not on, but I need to know what happens with Miguel and Teresa, like...
I only remember the puppet from Passions.
Timmy?
Timmy. He's the only...
And
the witch. And the witch.
Tabitha.
Yep.
I know them all. I actually have a book from, like, Tabitha wrote a book called Hidden Passions. Ooh. And I actually own that. It's in my entertainment stand right now.
Oh, I did want to throw in... I'm sorry, were you...
No, you're good.
Okay, I did want to throw in real quick, too. It was kind of crazy because... I wanted to bring this up to you earlier, too, but I figured this was going to be a good podcast story, is 6 months later, what my 5th grade teacher liked to do was find, like, articles in the, in this, like, kids' paper, and he would have to write, like, a little short story essay or whatever on it, and, every morning, like, you'd find either if you wanted to tell what you wrote, you could. Well, I ended up finding an article that asked if you thought the events of 9/11 brought the U.S. Closer together or apart. And I kind of wish that I could have redone this essay knowing everything I knew. Because when I said of this little story, I did think that it brought everybody together. I guess I was very naive about the terrorist part. Because it really did in the aspect. It
united the country.
It did.
No, it definitely did do that.
We won't forget. Memorial services, all those.
Even now, they still use that.
Yes, there's so many things that came about, but I just wish that I would have known these, because there was a whole other way of looking at it. Because in the same aspect of us coming together, I guess when you come together, there are people that feel excluded and come apart. And those are the people that I weren't thinking of, or the people that get excluded, or, they know a little, I don't know. They know a little bit more, I guess, the way of putting it. That question, I guess I could have redone it and not have put 100% into saying that we were together. Because, like I said, I didn't know. In some aspects, it did draw us apart.
Alright, so obviously, most people, if not everybody, know the official story of 9/11. But just in case you don't, the official story is that 19 hijackers that were associated with the terrorist group Al-Qaeda actually hijacked 4 different planes, crashed 2 of them into the World Trade Center. Another one crashed into the Pentagon, and then a 4th one that may have been headed for the Capitol or may have been headed somewhere else. That one was taken down in Pennsylvania. They supposedly did it because it was like Osama bin Laden's plan. He ended up making a video supposedly that claimed responsibility for the event. It was in Arabic, so I don't really know what it said because that is not a language that I speak. But I do have some information later on that may or may not help that case. Alright, so now that we've given you basic information, let's talk about the things that people normally don't hear in regards to 9/11. First, I wanted to start with warnings, because there's a lot of things that we see, and I think generally as a country, we would assume that there were no warnings prior to 9/11, that anything like that was going to transpire, because if we had warnings, why would we allow it to transpire when we're a giant military, like, superpower type thing?
Right.
I think we are, or were.
Right, and that makes sense, you know.
So, first off, the chief of counterterrorism of the Counterterrorism Center, Cofer Black, and CIA Director George Tenet tried for months prior to the attacks to warn Bush and the Bush administration about upcoming attacks by Al Qaeda. I don't think they ever really knew like specific targets, but they did know that something was going to happen and actually pitched a plan that was called the Blue Sky Paper to the Bush administration, their national security agency, and it was a plan to end Al Qaeda, but Bush's national security team said that they were not ready to consider the option at that time. So,
shady.
Right. In September of 1999, which of course was 2 years prior to September 11th, 2001, the attacks, a federal study of terrorism stated that Al Qaeda posed the most serious threat to the U.S. and could crash land an aircraft packed with explosives into the Pentagon, CIA headquarters, or White House. Kind of ironic that 1 out of 3 of those listed places was actually supposedly hit by a plane. Supposedly up to 12 countries, including Russia and MI5 in Britain, have warned the U.S. that they were going to be victims of an upcoming Al Qaeda attack, though they also didn't know specific locations, of course. And I'm not sure if they knew if it was going to be multiple targets at the same time. They may have just anticipated like 1 hijacked plane versus 4, which obviously heightens the situation.
Right.
But moving on. On October 6th of 2001, Bush actually received a memo that was titled, Bin Laden Determined to Strike in the U.S. So, that's, what, a month before 9/11? A month and 5 days? So, there's a little bit of warning right there. Not a lot,
no, but I mean, at least you could have looked a little bit more into it, been a little bit more on high alert, like, okay, what does he mean by this? I mean, there's more...
Like, it keeps coming back up?
Right.
What do you mean?
Okay, right. Something was stated about it months ago, now we're a month away from a projected time, and...
Right.
Nothing...
I don't know if they had specific dates either, but at the same time, you've been looking into this... Well, at least you should have been for 2 years, since September of 1999.
Right, well, that's what
You're telling me you don't have any information, along with what these other guys are finding between then, that could help you stop this strike.
Right.
Or that it's even really worth looking into.
Right, like, are these false...
Right, because there's no anything, there's not anything indicating.
Like, I get that there was 2 years, so I mean, you know, if they were thinking.
But that was a federal study, and like, A, those take a while, and then B, between then, you have the chief of counterterrorism and the CIA director telling you.
Well, right, that's what I was just going to say with that. Even though there was 2 years, it wasn't like it was that thing that happened 2 years ago and then it was silent. It was 2 years ago, and now, it's still happening, and now.
Yep. So that's just a couple of warnings that, you know, I didn't really go into too many details about dates and whatnot because there's a lot of information to get through.
Well, I guess, right. And I'll add this, you know, if we want to talk little warnings from the documentary that I was going to rewatch so that way I could give you everything about it. There was a voice clipped conversation between a person and, or I can't remember his name, and I don't remember what his role was. He was with calling Condoleezza Rice. Condoleezza Rice. Telling her to switch her ticket because he knew that she was supposed to be flying on a plane September 11th, 2001, or right, 2000? Was 2001 or 2000?
2001.
2001.
Yeah. You said it right.
Oh, shit. September 11th, 2001, flying on United 93. And he was telling her at first in a code, you're not saying it, but she wasn't really understanding what he was saying. Till in that voice clip, flat out says, you need to change your ticket date or push it back or miss your flight because you were on this flight. Doesn't say what's going to happen, just says he had a feeling something was going to happen. So,
which is kind of funny because I don't have anything written down on that, but I remember her being like a shady person around that time. Like I don't remember, I can't tell you why, but I feel like as a child I remember hearing her name a lot in bad terms.
Me too.
I can't say why, but
like I said, I do read. Like I said, and I don't know if maybe the document that I saw was proven to be faked, but I don't believe it. I don't know
what's fake and what's not.
Everything that they were pointing out just seemed so... And I do believe that maybe they did turn up the drama a little bit. You know, that's why I don't want to give you everything and say that it was 100% facts. I'm just saying that from what I recall from the video and what... This was the very first video that got me into conspiracy theories that made me realize that, hey, she doesn't always is what it seemed, so...
Right. I'll give you my final opinion on all this at the end. So if you like that, stay tuned.
Yes.
For now, we're going to move on to little information on the actual hijackers. Guys, there's some names in here, just a fair warning. I am going to absolutely slaughter these. I'm so sorry. I don't know. If you're a terrorist, I don't really know if I should be sorry. If you're not a terrorist, then I am so sorry. And to anyone who is actually, like, you know, who can say these names, like, with ease, like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for anyone.
Right, it's just not our language.
So with the hijackers, little fun fact is, after the attacks, 4 of the hijackers' passports were actually recovered. 2 of them came from the United 93 crash in Pennsylvania, which, that was the one that was on the way to the Capitol, but was taken down by the civilians on the plane, the passengers. They fought back. And it ended up just crashing without hitting the target. There was 1 passport that was in a luggage bag that had never made it onto the connecting flight. And I forgot to write down the flight name, but I'm pretty sure that was the one. It was American Flight 77.
Oh.
I don't remember what that one... I probably have it written down here somewhere. So I don't remember which one that went on. But anyway... and then there was one found by a passerby near the World Trade Center. Like, you know, all the rubble after they collapsed was just chilling on the ground, and this passerby finds a passport, I think a couple blocks away, and gives it to an NYPD officer. That's normal.
Right. I mean, it is normal to give, I would say, if you find a...
To give to an officer.
Passport, yes. But,
like,
the circumstances is normal. Or that, you know.
The planes were basically vaporized, but this
But your passport survived. Damn, I want whatever fucking they laminated that passport with.
Like, my instant thought was, when I heard that, was just like, did he throw it out of the window before he crashed so that everyone knew who did it? But, like, that's
would be
dumb.
So, well, I think that'd actually be kind of smart in a sense of, like...
There's other ways for people to know who did it that are better than, like, oh, I'm going to throw my passport out the window. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know. I guess if you feel so helpless and you're like, hey, I at least feel like, you know, if you feel like nobody might know you're on there... I don't know.
I gotta think that...
I can maybe
they had
say...
other suspicious factors, too, though. So I gotta think that at some point they would have identified regardless of the found passport.
I'm gonna say this, no matter what. I don't believe that passport was part of that. No. But I guess maybe... I can't say for 100% fact that that's not possible. You know what I mean?
Right.
I guess so.
I am also saying the same thing.
Right.
Like,
I know. I guess I just read a little bit more into it, but I do agree with you because no, you're right. There are more better ways to. I feel you could have, but I guess maybe.
I don't know.
Out of I bet you the chances of that happening though would be like a 1 in 8 point or 1 in .000.
Like there's enough numbers in life. Okay, I'm gonna move on before he gets too deep into numbers.
Oh, I'm already done.
So the passports they found were manipulated in fraudulent manners, which the ways they were manipulated were knowingly associated with Al-Qaeda. So, like, you know, the government already had that knowledge that this is how Al-Qaeda passports are basically, like, altered and made to look legit. And it's believed that at least 6 more of the 19 hijackers had similar clues on their passports. So that's like 10 total, I believe, if I just did my math right. Out of 19. So 10 out of 19 had, like, warning signs associated with Al-Qaeda. But other hijackers' passports also had suspicious indicators. It didn't say how many, but, I mean, it was up to 9, right?
Right.
Either way, you're at 10 out of 19. That's more than half. That's not a good thing. They would let all of them eventually in. So, here we get into some fun names. Sorry, again. We have Ziad Jarrah, who entered the U.S. in June of 2000 on a tourist visa. He went to flight school for 6 months without ever changing his visa status to student. He ended up leaving and returning 3 times during that time. And if the INS had known about his pending status change and like that he was out of status, they would have denied him entry into the U.S. supposedly. So like that's 3 times where they just didn't know what was going on, and should have been like, no, you can't come back. And instead, they let him right in.
Because a visa is more like, this is what you're here for, and if they find out that you're like,
you're lying.
Not right, that you can't come back. And I mean, if you're saying that you're here for
tourism.
Right. And
and then you're a student, but you don't change it. Like, it is possible. You can come as a tourist, be like, oh, I want to go to this school and stay.
Right. But, you have to switch it.
Yeah.
You can't. And then while you're being a tourism and you haven't switched it, you're not going to leave to go back home, you know what I mean, and then keep coming back.
There's actually things with that also if you have a pending status and then try to leave and come back. But
look at that.
Okay, little memo I have written in case anyone doesn't know is INS stands for the Immigration and Naturalization Services. It ceased operations in 2003 when its functions were transferred to 3 new entities: the U.S. Citizenship Immigration Services, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which we know is ICE, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which were all under the newly created Department of Homeland Security. That was in 2003, 2 years after 9/11. But they were running the show before any of that happened, before 9/11. Well, I guess during 9/11 and before.
Right.
So just think, if I ever say INS, just so you know, they're basically like ICE, Customs, all that stuff. Now moving on to some more of these hijackers. Marwan al-Shahi and Mohammed Atta both came in on tourist visas and attended flight school in Florida. They did end up updating their statuses to students, but they overstayed their admission in order to finish flight school. They ended up leaving and coming back while their status change was pending, which resulted in them having to go through a secondary inspection when they were entering the U.S. Basically, like, you got flagged and we have to check you out a little more.
Right.
They told the inspector that they were finishing flight school, but their application change status had been considered abandoned when they left the U.S. So, ultimately, they still were admitted as tourists while their student application was pending. So, should have been stopped right there a little bit, but still given the benefit of the doubt and let through. At least 6 of the hijackers, while they were in the U.S., violated immigration law, but not one of them got detected by INS. The CIA had surveillance on Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Midhar. They had attended a meeting. I don't remember where it was. I think it was in some African country. I'm sorry. I don't remember. My brain broke at some point. So
this is a lot of information.
It is, guys. This is only the back of the first page. But yeah, they went to this other country to attend a meeting that was to basically, further discuss a plan to attack America. And the CIA, even though, they had surveillance on them, they wouldn't share information with the FBI. So when the pair were living, when these people came back to the U.S. and when they were staying in the U.S., they actually rented a room from an FBI agent. Because the FBI had no idea, they didn't know what the CIA knew. So they didn't know that these guys were suspected terrorists planning to bomb America. So the FBI agent had no clue. He just thought they were two students. And that was in San Diego. They were trying to finish flight school, and FBI agent was Steve Butler, who rented rooms to them. There was an NSA agent who discovered that while they were in San Diego, Al-Hazmi and Al-Midhar actually made calls to Al-Qaeda in Yemen, where they would, like you were saying, they also spoke in code, which supposedly the NSA couldn't decipher because they didn't have enough manpower to go through it. Yeah. So 3 months prior to 9/11, the CIA actually lost track of Al-Hazmi and Al-Midhar, and they finally shared information with the FBI, and I'm not sure if they shared information with the NSA also. So, sorry. But after that, the next they had heard of the pair, these two terrorists that we would come to know them as. They were on the Americans' Flight 77 that crashed into the Pentagon. There you go. I told you I would have it later. Some claim that it's possible that the CIA had tried to use them as spies, but of course the CIA never agrees to that. They always deny those accusations. 15 of the 19 hijackers, as well as Osama bin Laden, were actually Saudi Arabian. Osama was born in Saudi Arabia. I did read somewhere that he left, I think, at a young age, but I find it funny that they're all the same.
Arabian.
Right. There is a rumor that at least one of the hijackers, if not multiple, attended school with a member of the bin Laden family that had been living in Florida. Now, just to kind of give you a little idea, though, bin Laden did have, I believe, 56, somewhere around there, brothers and sisters. So it's not like this is a small family, like 10 people and uncle lives in Florida.
No.
This is like, you don't necessarily talk to all of them in that case. So it's not necessarily that they were guilty, but it's just a little thing to think about, like, okay, but they could have been a connection.
Right. Like, if you have that many brothers and sisters, I guess it's hard, I guess, to know who really did have close connections, but I guess you have to look at to all of them, though.
Right.
You can't call off and
of course they'd be talking in code as well, so it would, if you're the NSA, you're going to say you don't have the manpower for that either, I'm sure.
Right.
But I also have here another important note is that $40 million had been appropriated by Congress to develop an entry-exit system, but they worried that would actually slow down trade. So INS forgoed the customs at land border and only ended up adapting a automatic entry process, which ended up being unsuccessful. INS did only have about 2,000 employees prior to 9/11. And once they did, at one point they did establish a student school system to try to track students that immigrated, like the student visas. But it didn't end up working. In 1996, Congress had mandated a new system be installed by 1999, but ultimately the program stalled and the senators repealed the 1996 act and ended up obstructing INS funding. Just keep that in mind, because that comes into play later, the obstruction. So the next section I have titled here is called No Warnings, Yet War Game Exercises. I tried to come up with
cute little ooh.
Yeah. I hope you all laughed there. Anyway. So just a little ironic fact is there were games such as Microsoft Flight Simulator and Cobra Command that actually gave you the option to fly planes and helicopters into the World Trade Center, like long before this happened. Most games ended up removing the Twin Towers from their skylines after 9/11 happened, just out of respect. They're like, it's too soon.
Right.
I don't even know if we put it in now in video games and stuff. Probably it wouldn't make sense, really, unless it was based in old times. But anyway, there was actually a Pentagon mass casualty project known as Operation Mascal. It was in October of 2000. It simulated a plane crash into the Pentagon. The exercise required emergency response team, U.S. government officials, and members of Defense Protective Services to conduct basically emergency simulations, like how they would treat the wounded. They had like little toy vehicles that they would use to act like pretend they were the emergency transport vehicles. So a little bit weird that they're basically practicing for what happened almost a year before it happens.
Right.
On the morning of 9/11, there was an ongoing training exercise in the skies that simulated planes being hijacked and uses weapons to target various strategic parts of the U.S., such as the Pentagon. When the FAA actually called for scramblers to intercept these hijacked planes, they were actually, I heard the recording, they were actually asking the FAA if this was an exercise or real life. So, like, they didn't...
Now, why would you even think that was an exercise if it wasn't, you know what I mean, programmed in your mind to have been something that you're scheduled to do?
Right. Now, even if you weren't scheduled that day, something that you have done at any point, as if there's a reason to simulate that, like, that's a threat that we need to address when it hadn't been mentioned supposedly at any point in time.
No warning, remember?
Right.
A little whoosh.
And a little fun fact about that exercise is it actually included false blips on the radar tracking systems. So I'm assuming that makes it a lot harder to identify which planes are, identify that they're hijacked before you get, like, notice. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because let's look at it. If you expect a plane to be going one direction, these planes turned around, basically, or, like, made unexpected turns.
You're right.
So if you were just looking at normal targets, you would see, like, oh, this plane turned off course. What's up here?
Right.
But if you have, like, 40 or I don't even know how many, let's even say just, like, 15 extra little blips, it could interfere. Like, you don't know if that's actually one of your planes, probably.
Right.
Or if it's a fake blip. Like, that's probably the point, is to figure out which one's fake and which one's real. So they would probably assume it was fake because it did an unexpected turn.
Right.
And then that would also explain, like, oh, is this real world or exercise? That question, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to answer real world because they're not expecting a plane in real world to actually turn it around. So I don't know if that's how it went, but I could see that happening. I could see that train of events.
Wow.
So because of this, the first I did see a couple different things on when the first hijacking report actually came in. I wrote down 8/19, but I think I saw like 8/20 something also. But it took 27 minutes to actually scramble the interceptors. And then from what I heard, or from what I was seeing, they didn't actually know where to go. But I guess they were expecting any threats would be coming from overseas. So they started heading towards the ocean to intercept planes that weren't in the ocean. They were in, like, New York City.
Right.
And that may have, initially got them started in the wrong direction, which delayed their time intercepting these actual things. Because I believe something else I saw, I don't have it written down, I don't know if it's true, but I saw that it took them like 18 minutes to intercept these planes, like to get to New York City, when in most of their training exercises it had only taken 10 minutes for them to get to any of these locations. So it's like an 8-minute difference, which makes sense if you originally start flying in the wrong direction because you don't know what's happening.
Right. You didn't know where to go.
Right. And just a little comparison, in 2000, NORAD, who was, tracking everything and sends out the scrambler interceptors, they actually had 67 intercepts with 100% accuracy. So they didn't fail once when they had to intercept 67 times in the year 2000. But on 9/11, they failed 4 times in one day.
Right.
Like, within hours of... It's just nuts.
It doesn't seem accurate unless false information or misguidance was given.
I don't know. So that brings us to the next section, which I don't think I really had a good title for this section, but I called it The Attacks and Witnesses. Dun, dun. Suspense music. So Hani Hanjour was supposedly a terrible pilot who, according to one of the flight school employees, didn't care about the fact that he couldn't even get through the course. But somehow he supposedly did a 330-degree turn while flying downward and crashed his plane into the Pentagon. Now, if you think about that, the plane supposedly crashed, like, basically ground level almost into the Pentagon straight on. So to do that, he was flying over highways like this is the Pentagon. There's a city nearby, like, you know what I mean? There's highways, there's cars, there's people going to work, coming. Like, there's a lot of different obstacles.
Right.
From what I saw, he only took out a couple of power lines above the highway, maybe. Like, it didn't show that he hit any of these obstacles, but supposedly he could barely pass his flight course and was a terrible pilot. But he managed that
he did
maneuver
this stealthful, which, I mean, I guess there are once-in-a-lifetime opportunities and chances, but right. Like, that'd be like me or you going behind a plane and being able to pull off this miraculous...
Right.
I don't believe
it could happen, but I don't think that's likely.
It's not, right, it's not plausible.
Yeah, that's not right. So American Airlines Flight 77, which is the one that crashed into the Pentagon, actually crashed into part of the building that had been recently renovated to include blast-proof windows, and only about 800 workers had returned to the offices in that area. And just as a little comparison, there would be as many as 4,500 people in any of the other sections any day. It killed workers in the Navy Operations Center, the Army Office of Administrative Assistance, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and possibly in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Like, there was a map that they showed and, like, the plane, but I personally, based off the layout, wasn't sure if it actually took out that office or if it barely missed it. And that was actually the only part of the building that was supposedly reinforced to withstand that kind of attack, which blast-proof windows kind of goes with that.
Right.
And I did see an interview, just a little, 2-minute clip of a woman who was stuck inside when the plane hit, and she was crawling on the floor to get to the window and was, trying to bang on it and knock it out, and she was basically stuck, and this guy had to throw a printer at the window a few times. Eventually it popped the frame out enough that they could start kicking it, hitting it with shit, and she ended up jumping out. I don't know what happened to the other people, but so I mean, it was legit blast proof, so that's multiple people saying that.
Right.
There were 2 firefighters, a maintenance worker, and a morning supervisor that all claimed before the plane actually hit the first tower that they heard sub-level explosions, meaning basically in basement levels of the towers. Mm-hmm. Some claim that when they were exiting after the plane crash, but prior to the collapse of the building, that the lobby was already completely demolished. Which, why is that?
How is that?
If the other levels are fine, none of the other ones they traveled through were okay, and the plane's burning up on the 40-something level, why is the lobby demolished?
Right, how did the lobby get?
That's my question. I'm not a scientist. If you can explain it to me, feel free.
Right.
I am going to be skeptical, so please have adequate proof.
Right.
The bodies of the hijackers ended up being identified through fingerprints or DNA, because basically the planes and everything on them were vaporized in almost all instances of the crashes, and with all 4 planes. One New York City firefighter said that everything, the desks, the chairs, everything was just dust, and the biggest piece of anything that he found was basically half a phone keypad that he said is about that big. So was that 2 inches maybe?
Wow. So not much. I mean, they're really, the chances
of
a lot of things, a lot of things surviving are slim.
That's what they say. But,
right.
I mean, but you also found the passport.
That's where I was trying that. Without saying it, I wanted to re-throw it back in there, but yeah, you're trying to make me believe that this piece of paper...
Well, that's why he was skeptical, because he's how do you get a passport? How do you identify these bodies to that level when everything beyond half a keypad is vaporized?
Gone.
Obviously, there's probably still some other little spots, but we'll talk about other things with the debris later. So in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, that was where United 93, the hijackers actually The passengers overtook them in the cockpit, and the hijackers just crashed the plane because they weren't going to hit their target. From what I could see and from what people were saying, because I did try to look up some pictures, but it basically just left a giant hole in the ground with like small metal pieces that some people that actually were on scene said that it just kind of looked like the metal pieces could have been dropped from the sky. Which I'm like, okay, so you again don't find any like real debris. But this one didn't crash into a building. Like this one crashed into an open field.
Like the ground.
Yeah, so like why are we not finding anything? Like we've all seen a plane crash.
Right,
I mean not in person, but like
right,
you've seen
but like
pictures.
nothing scattered, right. Something didn't break off when it hit the ground instead of
you find
blowing
the
up.
tail, you find
something.
The wing, you find evidence
right.
that a plane was there, and when you don't, people ask questions. So why are we not asking questions?
Right.
Just because the government's like, no, it vaporized. Well, it didn't vaporize in the other cases, but alright. Anyway.
It's one of those fluke things, just like how it flew that plane.
4 times, all in one day.
Right.
4 flukes, one day.
Damn, such a bad luck.
NORAD, what did you start? At the Pentagon, small pieces of debris were supposedly picked up by the government, like little tiny pieces. The biggest thing anyone said they saw was something that could be picked up and carried. Like basically you could have brought it in your car, picked it up, dropped it on the ground, took some pictures of it, and then brought it back. Like it's a fucking prop. I'm not saying it necessarily was. It could have actually been part of a plane, but it's just, again, ironic that there's no bigger pieces than what one human can carry by themselves.
Right.
And on top of that, over 80 of the local security recordings from, like, stores and whatnot nearby that should have seen the plane flying over the highway, like, going into the Pentagon, over 80 were withheld by the FBI. Like, they went and confiscated these videos and would not release them. And it was, I don't know if I said it was a firefighter that said that there was only, like, the largest piece he saw could have been moved by a person. Okay.
Yeah.
So, just kind of, like, why are you removing local videos also? Like,
right.
Wouldn't you want us to see that the terrorists did the attack, that this plane actually did come in? Like, and then, where are the people saying I saw the plane? Like, the ones on the highway driving that almost got taken out by a plane before... You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you should never do this, but I took a picture while I was driving to work the other day because there was a plane in the sky. It was flying, and it was running parallel to 31. Or, no, not 31, 481. And so I took a picture, and then it was, like, flying low, too, and I'm like, this is weird. Like, not thinking it's going to crash, like, it's just someone enjoying a private flight, you know, that's what I assumed. But I took a picture, like... You know, I'm pretty sure I put it on Facebook, or I was going to put it on Facebook. I don't remember, but like, it's something that caught my attention, and I would speak about if it then later crashed into, like, I don't know. Do we have any famous buildings in Syracuse? Okay, if it crashed into the dome.
Oh yeah, the dome.
Like. Yeah, if it crashed in the Syracuse Dome or whatever, like, I would be like, yeah, I saw that plane flying parallel to 481. So
right, I don't believe they'd strip your picture down of that either if you did that, even if you of that picture. But
they might take it for evidence, but eventually I would also
you'd be able
have
to re-release
it.
Like, right, but how come they took these and you can't have them? Right.
It's just, I don't know. The next section, which it'll lead us into, is called Conspiracy Question Mark. These are just little odd facts that kind of make you stop and go, okay, what?
What is actually going on
here? Right, like, is there more to the story? Outside of, like, these, you know, other things that are kind of weird. As if that's not enough.
Right.
Like, so what I've said so far, just to, like, kind of let you guys know, it at least makes me think, at minimum, that there were warnings that could have at least minimized the impact of this attack if it was in fact terrorists from Al-Qaeda. So I think at minimum the government definitely dropped the ball. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a conspiracy at this moment. Not necessarily. I'll let you know my final opinion when we are done going through the evidence.
Right, but like you said though, as of this moment, there are just those were just some little things, like you said, the warnings. And I feel like, you know, we dropped the ball on them.
Right.
Can we pick them back up? Let's see.
Probably not if you believe what the conspiracy notes say. So, BBC News was actually reporting that the Solomon Brothers building, which was a nickname for Building 7, it was not hit by a plane, but it was near the trade centers. So, it somehow caught fire. And this building, they were reporting, collapsed. Even though it was standing in the New York City skyline behind the reporter as she was saying it collapsed. And you could see the smoke from the Twin Towers. Like, they had obviously already done their thing, like, gotten hit and whatnot, and yet here is World Trade Center 7, the Solomon Brothers building, still standing. And she's like, it collapsed. And I think it took, like, another half an hour for it to collapse. So, like, are you a time traveler?
Right. Did you know that information? Like,
did you know it was going to collapse?
Mm-hmm.
And that could just be a case of, like, misheard information. Maybe she meant the World Trade Centers. Who knows? But
just the chances of you, I guess, see, I'd accept that if the building didn't fall 30 minutes later.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, yeah, you misunderstood and you meant to say that. But no, your building collapsed 30 minutes later, girl.
You're the Simpsons.
True.
So, he was like one of President Bush's security, I think he was like Secret Service. He was with him in Florida when he learned of the attacks. He was actually informed of the first plane crash, but he didn't tell President Bush that the first plane hit. He waited until he got reports of the second plane hitting, and then went to tell President Bush that America was under attack.
Not one number one. Not because that's not big enough. Now, okay, so let's put this a little bit into perspective. A fifth grader, me, or, you know, was sitting at home, or sitting in school, and saw a plane hit a building and realized, I don't know why it was so big, but knew it was a big thing.
Because everybody knows planes aren't supposed to hit buildings,
right.
So that's bad.
So why would an adult, whose job is to tell the president pretty much, like, hey, things are going awry, why would he wait until, the second one? Almost as if you were waiting for reassurance of, is that one, you know, are my plans going to actually happen? And now I'll go tell him.
That's crazy. There was a head of Pakistani intelligence, ISI. His name was General Ahmed. He sent $100,000 to the hijacker we mentioned earlier, Mohammed Atta, who I believe was basically like the head of the hijackers, like outside of like Osama bin Laden, supposedly.
Right.
Like on the ground, he was in charge of making the decisions, like where the targets would be and whatnot. And then obviously he flew the plane. But General Adma was actually having breakfast in Washington with government officials on the morning of 9/11. Also, so like you're here to watch this. Like you donated money to one of the hijackers. Why are you having breakfast with one of our officials on the day that he hijacks the planes? Just saying, that's a little weird.
Shady. I wish I had a shady button. I mean, it probably would have broke.
A little shady, like you know, you hold up those auction signs.
Yeah.
Just get one that says shady.
Oh,
we can make one.
Right. I was about to say, just wait, guys.
So Professor Gurnat, who was a professor of Islamic and Arabic studies, and Arabist Dr. Abdel El-M Husseini both indicated that the official translation of bin Laden's confession video weren't actually translated accurately. So like him saying, I'm guilty, I'm behind 9/11, they're saying whoever translated it did not do a very good job.
Right.
And basically put in what they wanted to hear.
Yeah. Shady. Again.
Right. So a fun fact is in 1989, the president of the World Trade Center 7 design, that's the one that fell later on, that didn't have a plane hit it, fell the same day, I think around like 4 or 5 o'clock at night. So hours after the other ones had fallen.
Oh my goodness.
He said that we built in enough redundancy to allow entire portions of the floor to be removed without affecting structural integrity. So, what does that mean? Well, that means that if you take out part of the floor, it should still be fine. It shouldn't collapse. It shouldn't have any negative effects. So, this building that only had a couple of fires burning throughout it during the day of 9/11, somehow, even though it's designed to maintain its structural support, somehow just collapsed later on that day.
And another fluke.
Like, again, not hit by a plane, not attacked, nothing happened.
Just fire.
And it does also collapse in the same way that the other two trade centers did. So, that's a little bit why is your fire burning the same way to fuck up your steel.
Right.
But Les Robinson said that the Twin Towers were designed to withstand the impact of a Boeing 707 hitting any location and likely could have withstood multiple plane impacts. So, I tried to look up some little comparisons between a Boeing 707 and a Boeing 757, I believe it was, because that's what actually hit the Twin Towers. Maybe I didn't, you let me know if my source is bad, but here's what I found. They were about the same length, like I believe it was like a 2-foot length difference. The 707 had a 20-foot larger wingspan than the one that actually hit the Twin Towers, so it was a longer wingspan.
Right.
The 757, the one that did hit, is actually about 2 feet taller, but, you know, that's 2 feet.
Right.
The 707 had 4 engines versus 2 on the 757, but the 757 did have more thrust per engine, which I'm assuming is kind of like power.
Yeah, like horsepower, I guess.
Yeah, and then it had a shorter range and cruise speed. But the 757 could also carry about 60 more passengers than the 707. Right. But I feel like passengers shouldn't make the building collapse like that. Like they shouldn't, a body shouldn't burn hot enough to cause the damage that was done.
Right, but what I was just thinking after you just said that is technically though, if it held how many more people?
About 60. It was like 59.
If it held like 60 more people, that could take what could be just a minor coincidence fluke and turn into a major tragedy because 60 more people's lives have now been lost. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I get you.
You change your numbers a little bit more because now we're in the conspiracy part of it. So I guess.
Yeah, plenty for this.
I know. I just wanted to add that little tidbit, you know, because it just hit me.
I'll touch on that a little bit later, I think, too. Like, we'll connect that to something I have later on, too. I don't know where it is. So, basically, what they claimed happened that caused the buildings to collapse was they called it a pancake theory, where basically it was just a quick collapse of everything. The steel had supposedly heated enough to weaken. It broke loose from the columns, and it was basically just falling, like it was pancaking. So sandwiching, whatever you want to. I feel like I don't have to explain that. We all know what flattening is. But there were 47 columns in the core, again, that the steel broke loose from, supposedly. And those should have been, still standing. If they weren't impacted by the plane, they should have still been standing in the air. And even if they were impacted by the plane, I feel like whatever was below them still should have been standing. Okay, you know what I mean? Like, there should have been some tall-ass columns left. But the columns that remain were like one little tiny, like I feel like we've all seen them. They weren't that tall. Like, you could put a person next to, like, maybe 2 people stacked on top of each other. Right. That kind of height.
Right.
The Twin Towers actually collapsed at free fall speed. So, that would mean that they had 10 floors shattering per second. So, basically collapsing onto themselves within 1 second. 10 floors.
Whoa.
Which is inconsistent with the pancake theory. Like, it wouldn't work like that fast.
Right, because I was just going to say that's rapid. Like, that's really fast and...
Right. Oh, here we go. The remaining tower core columns, so the ones we mentioned just a second ago, those actually looked cut at a slanted angle, which again, I think we've all seen these pictures. And that's consistent with demolition methods. That's what they do to the basements in demolitions. It helps them keep control of where the debris falls. There was molten metal, which some of that was even on top of these column cores, or whatever, the core columns, my bad. And for 6 weeks after the collapse, there were hot spots of up to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit documented in the debris. And just for kind of a reference, jet fuel supposedly burns between 800 degrees and 1,500 degrees. Popular mechanics did estimate that the temperatures inside of the Twin Towers when they were burning, like before they collapsed, were about 1,800 degrees because obviously there's other materials inside the building as well that add to that. But that's still not the 2,000 degrees that these hot spots are testing.
Right.
But here's something fun that likes to get nice and hot. Thermite. Thermite cuts through steel and produces molten iron and dust clouds. Niels Horace actually found active thermite in the Twin Tower debris that he believes was there before the attacks by the planes. Which kind of makes sense if you think about the slanted columns. Like, okay, so you cut those columns with the thermite, is my guess. Yeah, right. Because it cuts through steel, so you cut the columns with the thermite, and then sent the planes right in. Like,
and then that would get your temperature. You know what I mean? The heat to stay
in the 2,000 degrees at the bottom of the degree pile.
That's what I say. Why it remained.
Right.
Like, you would think that if it was just steel, it would eventually kind of cool itself off or quicker. But if it's this
steel
little,
supposedly does lose its ability to keep its strength. So like it weakens supposedly at I saw anywhere from 600 to 1,100 degrees, but even on a high end 1,100, yeah, it is possible that the steel weaken and collapse. But again, these planes hit in like the 40th floors. So why are we finding this stuff in the basement levels? Like under all the debris,
shouldn't it all be the hot, or
wouldn't
the
it be on top?
Right.
Yeah, I get you. I'm with you. I don't understand, but anyway. So Bush and Cheney, when they actually met with the 9/11 Commission, which was, they were given the task of investigating the 9/11 attack, making sure, like, yeah, okay, it is responsible, it was these people, this is actually what happened, whatever. They only met with them under their terms. So, Bush and Cheney said they would only appear together. I actually watched a reporter asking Bush why they would only meet together. And he's like, because they want us to answer questions, and we'd love to answer their questions. And he was like, yeah, but why are you doing it together? And Bush was like, because they have questions they want to ask us, and we're excited to answer those questions. Like, he fucking looks at the next reporter, and he's like, like, done with the other guy. Like, don't fucking ask me why we're doing it together. Like, really defensive. It was crazy. But they said they'd only appear together. They would not appear under oath. They wouldn't allow any press or family members in the room. And they wouldn't allow recording of any kind. So basically, like, that's as off-record as you can get.
Right.
Beyond that, we have Ted Gunderson, who was a former FBI chief. He claims the CIA and the government are actually behind most, if not all, of the terrorist attacks from things like 9/11 to the U.S. Embassy, I think it was a bombing in Kenya, the USS Cole attack, and more, including like the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. He claims that, according to Imad A. Salim, I'm gonna call him Salem. That is probably not right, but Imad A. Salem was instructed by the FBI to build a bomb. He thought it was going to be something that had fake powder, obviously not something that would explode, but when he asked the FBI about it, he was told, no, it's going to be a real fucking explosive. And this was for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, I believe. And that only 6 deaths occurred, which wouldn't be enough to get anti-terrorist laws passed.
No.
Just saying.
Right, goes back to the numbers and why, it holding 60 more people and...
But he did say that was something that the FBI had planned, basically. And then the fun little note here is that I didn't have a chance to double check this either, so don't quote me on it. But supposedly the 2008 National Institute of Standards and Technology didn't actually test any steel or a controlled demolition hypothesis in regards to their final report for the World Trade Center 7 or the Salomon Brothers building. So the one that didn't get hit by a plane but was taken down by fire, that one didn't actually, the steel wasn't even tested to confirm, it got heated or whatever. It was basically just assumed it happened the same way the other ones did.
Right.
Even though it wasn't the same circumstances at all.
Right, we're way different.
Right. Next, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the conspiracy side with the Bush and Bin Laden connection. And that's like the families. It's, there's a few players up in here.
Mm-hmm.
And it spreads back as far as the 1970s when Salem bin Laden, who was one of Osama's many, many brothers, and George W. Bush, who that's the first Bush president, senior, they founded Arbusto Energy Oil in Texas. A man named James Beth had actually funneled money from Salem to set up George W. Bush in the oil business. So they're basically partners in this.
Right.
I have just this is like a weird kind of coincidence with the Bin Laden family, is that like Salem actually died in May of 1988, the one that helped set up the company. He died in a freak accident. He had 15,000 hours of flight experience, but when he took off, he decided he was going to fly into some power lines, get entangled, and then plummeted 150 feet to the ground and died. Like,
now, the guy that has that much experience with flying managed to do that, but the guy that couldn't even barely pass flight school pulled off the best corkscrew turn.
Right? Osama bin Laden's father, Mohammed, actually also died in a plane crash in 1968, and his half-sister, brother-in-law, and her mom died in a plane crash in 2015. So I think it's really weird that planes are like so into
big
their family.
In that. Yeah. And I guess though, with having that many people in your family, the chances of crazy things happening, well, I'm just bringing over together are a little bit bigger. But the fact that they all happen to do with planes and weird accidents.
Right.
Not just like...
I don't know the circumstances of all of them, but like, yes.
But most of them...
Why would the one fly into power line?
Right.
And that was like, the one that flew into the power lines, he was like Osama's like... Osama was his little brother, and if I remember right, like, Osama idolized him. Like he was the one that could get through to him. And it was after he died when, like, Osama started really getting fucked up and into this, like, serious terrorist shit. So, like, there was actually something I saw that was, like, basically questioning, like, would Osama bin Laden have been the person he was if not for his brother's death?
Aww.
Which kind of sucks, but, I mean, you were old enough to know better.
Right.
And had enough brothers that you could have easily found another one. I'm sorry, that was really terrible. I'm not discrediting it. Oh, that's a morbid joke for you. Sorry, guys. Anyway, moving on. There was a private investment firm known as the Carlyle Group, and that was actually known for connections to influential figures in Washington, such as George Bush Sr., who was a senior advisor of that group, the Carlyle Group, starting in 1998. Why do we mention this? Because Shafiq bin Laden and his family, also related to Osama, invested in some of the Carlyle's funds, including a very large defense fund, or a very large defense-oriented fund, up until just after 9/11, when the Bin Laden severed their ties in October. Which, I believe the public was actually a little bit part of that, too, because they called them out. They're like, you're going to profit so much from this war we're going to now.
Right.
The Carlyle Group actually had an annual investor conference on the morning of 9/11, including ex-politicians. Bush Sr. was either there on 9/11 or the day before. But Shafiq bin Laden, Osama's brother, and, a bunch of other, like, ex-politicians and, like, big-name people were all there at this investor meeting as the Twin Towers are being hit. So there's another connection. Like, a group of the Bin Laden family that had been living in Florida was actually allowed to leave basically as soon as the no-fly order of 9/11 was lifted. So, like, obviously we went into security lockdown and all planes were grounded. And basically as soon as that order came up, they were allowed to leave, like, without being interrogated, even though they're known relatives of a terrorist. Like, you would think they would want some information.
Right.
Not
at least give us a little bit before you go.
Right. I forgot his title and what he did, but a man named Dan Christensen believes that the Sarasota family actually played a role in 9/11 and, like, aiding the terrorists. And it was weird because the FBI ultimately sent him a letter where they said that no connection was found between the hijackers and the family. But the letter was dated a year before the guy broke the story about the family connection. So, like, how is it possible for you to date a letter? Like, I mean, you could say that maybe someone was tired and just got the year wrong, but I mean...
But usually that's something that they would look over and fix. That somebody else would have been like, oh, wait, you got that wrong and we're in this year.
It's possible, but it's really weird, and if it's not, like, an accidental thing, then that's messed up, because that basically means they're trying to cover tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Supposedly, in 2001, the Bush admin told the FBI and intelligence agencies to back off investigations that involved the bin Laden family, including 2 of his relatives that were living next to the CIA headquarters. Which...
Why?
Well, he's a terrorist. Here's his family. They live right next to an important building of ours, but we're just going to assume they're good. Like, let them go.
They're okay.
Don't even look at them.
Right, don't ask them nothing.
So now you all are probably thinking we're crazy. You're like, we're lost our minds. Like, why would anybody do this? We got some notes here that are going to tell you why somebody may do this, or people may do this. Because obviously, if it's a cover-up, like, it's not one person that did it. It's a lot of people.
A lot of people are going to be behind it.
Again, either way, they dropped the ball. I don't know. So this section I call, okay, but why? The aftermath. So why would someone ever try to do something like this? Why would you bring down your own planes, kill your own citizens, and then lie and say it's terrorists? Well, the military and CIA funding was being cut. We talked about how, I think it was INS had their funding cut as well. So their funding's being cut, and what brings in a ton of money, especially in military and like defense systems and intelligence? War. Because we need those services more than anything during war. We need to know what's happening. We need to know we're protected and that we have the best technology, basically. Though Afghanistan and Iraq were actually targeted, but I thought it was a little weird that Saudi Arabia was declared off limits, supposedly because they didn't want to jeopardize relations with them. But you have 15 of 19 hijackers who are from Saudi Arabia. And Osama was born there. He may not have stayed, but he was born there.
Right.
So it's just, it's weird.
Makes no sense. Like, okay, like you just said, 15 out of 19, but let's go after...
But, during one speech, President Bush Jr. did say, of course we're going after Saddam. I mean, Osama bin Laden. Now, Saddam was the leader of Iraq, which is one of the countries we targeted. And as we all know, he was killed on December 30th of 2006. But Osama bin Laden wasn't killed until May 2nd of 2011. Supposedly. I mean, I couldn't find any pictures of a body that looked dead of him. Not like the only thing I saw was the same exact picture on every source that I'm not going to trust one picture. And he looked peacefully at ease. Like, we didn't fuck this guy up when we caught him. We put him to sleep, and then... Is that all that happened? Like, how did this work?
Yeah, it was a stealth mode operation.
Like,
no, I don't.
Even stealthily, like, this man doesn't have one bruise on his face. Not one of you took one punch.
No.
Come on.
Right.
I would have.
I would have too.
You're military. You wanted to. So, Osama bin Laden was given, supposedly, a sea burial. So he was, like, wrapped up and dropped into the sea. So, we'll never know if that's really his body.
All the evidence.
And also, if we were after him, if he did this on September 11th of 2001, A, why did it take us almost 10 full years to find him? And B, why did we kill Saddam Hussein in Iraq before we even found Osama bin Laden? Like, maybe he knew. We couldn't get any information. You started a war with Iraq and Afghanistan. Wouldn't you think the leader of Iraq would have information you need? And then you think you got it all before you killed him? Like, I understand not wanting him to be a ruler, but we have prisons.
Right.
We could have put him in there. There's now the Patriot Act that we'll talk about later on. Like, it just doesn't really make sense to me. If you really wanted to pinpoint Osama bin Laden, that you're not going to interrogate the leader of one of the countries you think he might be in.
Right.
Or that you targeted in response to his attack. But, again, why? Why would they do this? Money. Because of 9/11, there were 2 wars started. There was the Iraq War, and I can't remember what the other one's officially called. I'm pretty sure I have that somewhere also. I'm sorry. We'll get to it somewhere, hopefully. If not, there were 2 wars started. One is still ongoing. It's whatever war we're still in. But then there was also the Iraq War that was started, right after. And from the Iraq War, federal contractors profited $138 billion. There was one company in particular, right? One company in particular, Halliburton Oilfield Services Corporation, actually gained $39.5 billion in contracts related to the Iraq War. Almost $40 billion they gained because of one of the 2 wars. Now that war, I don't have it written down, but it wasn't that long in comparison to the one we're in now. Like, it ended. You know what I mean? We're not still in it.
Right.
So you can make $40 billion off a war that lasts a few years. What are you making off this one that's still ongoing because of those attacks? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's crazy. But I got a little suspicious here, not gonna lie, because we're talking about money, and money is the worst. Like, it's the motivation for so much bad in the world. In 2002, there was the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that was passed by Congress, and that established a sweeping, auditing, and financial regulation for public companies. Supposedly, it applied to all publicly traded companies in the U.S., and as well as wholly owned subsidiaries and foreign companies that did business in the U.S. or were publicly traded. It also applied to private organizations in regards to, it said that they should not knowingly destroy or falsify financial data and can be penalized if caught. Well, things like the Federal Reserve are private institutions, private companies that would have to oblige by those, like the World Trade Center, all these different, I think the World Trade Center, and research is hard, but but you know what I mean, so I'm wondering, would that have affected the World Trade Centers, because the definition of a World Trade Center is supplies businesses with access to international trade services / facilities and brings together the offices of government and industry that serve and carry on trade. So we're talking about international trade and businesses and shit. Would that have applied? The act have applied to them. So could it be that they destroyed that to cover up financial records within the Twin Towers?
Right.
The World Trade Center 7 was nicknamed the Salomon Brothers building because it actually housed the Salomon Brothers Bank. I believe they financed its reconstruction or whatever when it was built. Which, if I remember right, it was built on September 11th, 1941. That was the first day they broke ground.
Right.
So it's a little weird that it literally survived 60 years to the day.
Yeah.
Before it collapsed.
That is crazy.
But World Trade Center 7 also supposedly contains Secret Service, the Security and Exchange Commission, a secret CIA office that was used to spy on and recruit foreign diplomats that were based at the United Nations, and it contained the Office of Emergency Management and Operations Center, which seems like it'd be something you would really want the use of during this crisis that was going on.
That you're gonna need.
Right. Since 9/11, military spending has increased basically every year. I didn't want to write down an exact number because I kept finding different things, but you can find all the graphs where it shows that it's been on a steady incline regardless of the actual number. As of 2020, from what I found, it was at about $775 billion. So that's military spending. That's what we're spending on our military. $775 billion now. And that was a 4.4% increase over 2009 from what I saw. So, obviously, it continues to go up.
Right.
And the U.S. is actually the world's largest military spender. We spend the most money on our military. Which is crazy, because I've seen some, I don't know where they were. They might have been, Japan or Korean. But those soldiers, I wouldn't want to mess with them. I'm sorry. I think that some of them could kick our soldiers' ass. But, again, there were 2 preemptive wars that have taken place since 9/11. Meaning, okay, terror's here, we're going to go take it on before it actually destroys us, or, I don't know what the other one was. Oh, here we go. It was the Iraq War and the War on Terror. And those have killed around 800,000 civilians. Like, we're preemptively striking to prevent damage and whatnot, but we're killing almost 1 million civilians for no reason.
Right.
Since 9/11, also, nearly all of the Bill of Rights has been subverted, so, like, undermined. Why? Mostly because of the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act was passed on October 26th of 2001 to punish and deter terrorist acts. Of course, that's what they say. It made it easier to spy on ordinary Americans by allowing phone and email communication monitoring, collecting bank and credit reporting records, and tracking internet activity on the web, which, that's all things our government still does. They would send national security letters issued by the FBI without judges' approval to obtain personal information. So basically, they'll send you a letter and say, we need, I don't know, this bank information or whatever. Even though a judge didn't sign it, you have to give it to them. And the information that they received or obtained, whether it was, through you or, like, there were times, we'll get a little into other ways they can obtain. But the information they obtained, they weren't required to destroy. So basically, once it's accessed, even if it concerns innocent Americans, it just chills wherever they leave it. Which, if it's digital, I mean, do we know if there's hackers that can hack the government? I supposedly know one. No, and actually, when I worked at a certain place, there was a guy that trained me, and he said that he actually had FBI or CIA, some, like, federal agent show up at his house because he got too close to hacking the Pentagon. And he actually worked at an Apple store and shit for a while, supposedly. So, like, I mean, I think he was smart, he seemed smart, and he didn't seem to be lying, but, like, that's fucking Men in Black. But when you received the national security letters, you were also prohibited from telling anyone. So you're basically given a gag order. Like, it's crazy. Out of 192,499 national security letters issued between the year 2000 and 2006, only one led to a terror-related conviction, and that conviction would have happened even if they hadn't obtained their information like that, like even without the Patriot Act.
Right.
So, what is this? Why do we not really like the Patriot Act? Because if the government agents have any suspicion that you're a terrorist, they can detain you, they can torture you in hopes of receiving information. And what does that include? You're like, torture, okay, like, are they going to play songs on repeat for weeks on end, or, like, beat me? Like, it gets worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things they like to do is waterboard you. This creates a sensation that you're drowning. And what is that? Because I didn't know unless you watch Scandal or some other show, you might not know either. I learned from Scandal because Huck was waterboarded because he was considered in violation of the Patriot Act. Mm-hmm. And they basically take a cloth, they put it over your face, and then they pour water on it. So you think that you're drowning and, like, you're panicking. I don't know if you can really drown. I believe some people did actually have, like, bad experiences in regards to that. Another thing they like to do is called walling. In this, they actually encircle the detainee's neck with a collar or a towel or something of that nature, and then they'll slam them up against a false wall. There was actually at least one detainee who was slammed against an actual wall. I don't know why they did it, if they did it on purpose, or I don't really know how you do it on accident, right. But, like, he actually had injuries because they slammed him against an actual wall. There's sleep deprivation, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. It's something that, a lot of people deal with, but, like, most of us don't have to be kept awake for hours or days on end, like, being shackled or forced to stand. Some of them were kept in, like, stressful positions, like, so things that aren't comfortable, like, probably, like, fetal position or, like, crooked. Imagine someone shoved in a dog kennel. I don't know. But routinely when they were being sleep deprived, they were also made to be nude, so that they kind of felt like shame also. And they also had round-the-clock interrogations going on at the same time. And that's just a handful of things that they would do. There's obviously other methods as well. Those are just a couple. The Patriot Act also allowed the government to conduct searches without notifying the subjects until after they'd done the search. And, like, they didn't have to do it immediately either. They could wait. So it could be like weeks before you were actually notified that the FBI still went in your house and took some of your records, and like that's why you're missing some shit. Which kind of makes me wonder because I lose shit all the time. So I'm like, but why would they want my Call of Duty game? So, but it would allow the FBI to also secretly conduct, I don't know, probably a physical search of the premise. I wrote physical search, so I'm guessing that's what it would be. Would allow them to conduct a physical search of the premise or wiretap to obtain evidence without proving probable cause, which violates your Fourth Amendment rights. There were actually like four or five different Fourth Amendment rights that were violated because of the Patriot Act. So, I mean, it's just, there's a lot. It took away your civil liberties. The war added up so much money for all these people on the inside. So you're like, yeah, but maybe, I mean, why would it be a conspiracy still? Well, one little fun fact I have. Last thing I got for you guys before we close it out here. It was London, July 7th of 2005. I believe it's called the 7/7 bombing. You can Google it. There were 3 trains and 1 bus that were bombed, killing 56 people. At the same time that bombing happened, or almost exactly the same time, there was an anti-terror training exercise taking place, which dealt with the same exact situation in the same exact bus stations. So the bombing of the same bus stations at almost the same time. Kind of funny how that's the same thing that happened with our planes the morning of 9/11. And the UK, I don't know the details of this act, but they introduced the Terrorism Act of 2006 on October 12th of 2005 and passed it on March 30th of 2006 in response to this bombing. So that's within a year, you know, they had their own Terrorism Act that they put into place because of this bombing.
Right.
So I think it's just a little suspicious that all these activities happen, and it, like, makes the public think, oh my god, we're under attack, we need to band together and get this enemy out of our lives and make sure our family and everyone we love is safe. But then basically, as soon as it's done, the government's like, but we're going to put some more restrictions on things and pass a couple of terrorism laws and say it's for your safety, when really it could be to make us more money, it could be to give us more control, or most likely both. Which, that is my honest opinion, is that I think in order to kind of benefit from this and possibly help pay back federal government debts to, like, the Federal Reserve or things like that, basically to make profit, I do think that the government, at very least, allowed this to happen. I think they could have done more to prevent it or minimize the damage. I don't know if they specifically, you know, formed these terrorists to do this. I don't think they did that. But I do think that they probably did some back-end shit that provoked this. And that ultimately they knew it was coming and allowed it to happen, which is just as bad as doing it themselves.
Right, I believe it. Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, they were tied in. The families, you know what I mean? Like, they've been working with each other. They knew each other back in the 70s. So I just feel like, you know,
right.
It was a little bit of both, the way that I could look at it. A little bit of government interference and a little bit of maybe just plain stroke of genius luck. You know what I mean? Like, of finding the right people to finally say, yes, they'll do it. Or,
right.
you know, so that's what I mean by, like, the luckness comes in. Because, I mean, I don't feel like there's a guarantee, like, you know what I mean? They needed to find people, I guess, that were willing to sacrifice their lives.
Yes, I don't know. Yes and no, because I guess, like, suicide bombers are a real thing. Like, we learned about that term in school. So, I mean, there are people that are willing to do it, but, like, I don't know. The government, if you guys actually look into it, I mean, we'll do other stuff later on, I'm sure, but there are a ton of other operations where they're called false flag events. And, like, one good one that I found this morning is called Operation Northwood. And it actually has several different, like, operations under it, including Operation Mongoose. And it's just kind of a bunch of, I believe, I hope I'm not remembering it wrong, because I found a lot of different things. But it's a bunch of different, like, false flag events. So it's these events that the government thinks, what can we do to get public support in order to basically have the public say, look, President, look, Congress, we want to go to war and stop this bad guy before they take us out.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's a lot of incidents like that. Not just the London bombing. Like obviously, I threw London in there because it's
that was
kind
just
of
a coincidence. Not
right.
It's kind of similar.
It's kind of ironic. Basically, the same thing happens. Instead of planes, it's trains, it's buses and trains.
Right.
But like it happens over there too. It's almost like they saw that it worked for us and thought, "What can we do?"
Mm-hmm.
Like that was my initial instinct. But there are other things, and like I said, if you want someone to start, take a look at Operation Northwoods and Operation Mongoose, and start there. That was really cool.
Right.
I'm gonna look more into it too. So we do have a song of the week for you guys this week. We did pick a song of the week for you guys, but then we realized we had already picked that song, so we ended up having to pick another one after we had already recorded this episode. So this week, the song of the week that we picked for you is called Bad Intentions by Nikki Heaton. And I'm not going to be doing a song of the week video anymore, but I will be posting a link to one of the lyric videos for that song in the description. So if you do want to check out the song of the week, just check our description and go ahead and click on the link and it'll take you right on over. But thank you all for watching this week's episode. Stay tuned again for next week.
We love you. Comment, like, subscribe. And bye.
Bye, guys.
Tainted Warriors, a TW Productions podcast.